Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Western Perspective. I'm Taylor Hanna. Tonight we feature part 2 of our Climate Inaction analysis series, exploring energy alternatives in the fight for climate change. I sat down with energy researcher James Eggleston to discuss the economics behind upgrading existing infrastructure after watching the film 2040 and what other options we have moving forward. So the film explores many wonderful technologies that could be implemented here already, but it definitely doesn't highlight the political and economical shifts that we need to actually achieve these solutions. Do you think that this is a big hurdle in achieving a greener future?
Yeah, so a few things spring to mind. First and foremost, innovation always outpaces regulation. New technologies always come in and they're always ahead of where regulators are at. Regulators are traditionally 3 to 5 years always behind a new technology. So, when you have a technological transition, you do have a societal transformation, but that does follow up. On the economic side of things, with every new technological innovation, it often requires new business model innovation as well. And so, you can't really have one without the other. You can't have new business innovation without new technology, and vice versa, two sides of the same coin. So, there's always ways that we can optimise and improve the way that we're currently doing things. New technologies come out all the time. You'll notice that disruption happens faster today, though. So, the uptake of a new technology, for instance, a touchscreen mobile phone, is very quick, as compared to previous innovations like DVDs or TVs. And with the energy market, for instance, this is a utility service that has not changed that much in the last 100 years. And all of a sudden now, with Internet of Things, with growing sets of data, better sensing technology, and technologies such as distributed ledger technology or blockchain softwares, artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're starting to see rapid transformation hitting the network, and we're seeing cheaper, smaller assets that can be connected to the networks in the forms of solar PV generators and also in battery technology grid.
Do you think that the government needs to fund more of these technologies though?
Yeah, so we've been doing those here in Australia for a number of years. So I'll point out, solar has a long history here in Australia. So the solar hot water heater, for instance, that's a technology that we created here in Australia. And at this point in time, 30% of all Australians right across the country have solar panels on their rooftop. Now, there's a range of reasons why people put solar PV on their rooftop. By and large, it's because they've either built a new house or they've retired. Those are the factors driving those decisions. And people are putting that technology on their rooftop because it saves them money. If you're at home consuming energy during the day, it's cheaper to have a generator on your rooftop than it is to be purchasing energy from the network. So already we're starting to see a high proliferation of solar panels, for instance, and now batteries are following that rate of adoption right across the country.
So you think that decentralisation is the key in moving forward with energy?
Yeah, one of the beneficial aspects for decentralisation for the network is that it allows the generation to be located much closer to the point of consumption. So, for instance, when we pay our energy bills today, those bills are built out of a tariff structure that was designed largely for centralised generation. So the way to provide energy to a city 50 or 60 years ago, and it still provides our energy to our cities today, is you have a big generator far away from your city because you don't live next door to it, and then you pipe that energy in over a long distance and then reticulate that energy out across the city or city proper. Now in that instance, that does provide reliable, secure electricity, but it's very transmission and distribution heavy. It's very infrastructure heavy. So what that's meant is that we've built out these very expensive assets that we're now paying back, and we pay that back in the form of our energy bill. So when we pay our energy bill here in Western Australia, for instance, 2/3 of our payment goes off for the infrastructure. Only a small amount of that is actually for the energy. Now what distributed generation is doing is people are meeting their own energy behind the demands during the day, behind the meter. Battery technology is enabling those prosumers, we call them. These are producers and consumers of electricity, allowing those prosumers to monetize their energy by time shifting solar generated in the day for them to use at night. And now what is happening is we face this point where people are asking, should I remain connected to the network? Because if I can generate enough energy for myself during the day and save some for night, what's the point of being connected?
Electric vehicles.
Yeah, well, in the case of electric vehicles, by 2025, here in Western Australia, 50% of our light vehicle fleet will be electric. There's a whole range of reasons for that. We've recently had a Senate inquiry looking at Australia's adoption of electric vehicles, and at a federal level, is there anything the government can do? And they highlighted barriers such as the luxury vehicle tax as being a barrier to uptake of electric vehicles. From an efficiency standpoint, electric vehicles are far more efficient than a combustion cycle engine. When I burn fuel inside a vehicle for mechanical work, only 30% of the energy in the fuel is transferred into revolutions on the axle. But with electric vehicles, they're 80% plus efficiency. So without a doubt, electric is the future. But yes, some countries are far ahead of where we are. The exemplar country is Norway. The biggest problem Norway have right now is they'll have a nuclear family of 2 parents and 2 teenage children. There will be 4 electric vehicles, and the house can't actually handle charging all those 4 vehicles over the course of a night.
How would the everyday Australian afford an electric vehicle? Because they are perceived as quite expensive at the moment.
Yeah, so the electric vehicles in Australia are considered as a luxury vehicle under the current legislative framework. We are seeing very affordable electric vehicles globally. In China, for instance, the biggest electric vehicle are these electric scooters or bikes. And what they do is they have these battery vending machines that instead of charging it, you just put the old battery in the vending machine and a new one comes out full of energy. And that represents 30% of the world's electric vehicle fleet. So it's just here in Australia that we're only seeing the top-end models coming through. But we are starting to see, the Nissan Leaf, for instance, as an affordable, very small electric car. And if you have solar panels on your rooftop and you're charging that vehicle during the day, you're not paying for fuel. So for instance, if you live in the outer suburbs and you have to drive into the CBD every day, it's much more affordable to have an electric vehicle, such as the Nissan Leaf, if you're charging using your own electricity. The fuel's free.
In the grand scheme of things, Australia's contribution to global emissions is quite small. So unless we address these issues elsewhere in the world, do you think that we might not get ahead at all?
So Australia, we are a relatively small country. We have, physically we're quite large. We have the land area of North America, but we only have the population of Mexico City. So our energy consumption, say compared to a China or to America, yeah, it is quite small. Only 10% of our overarching generation fleet is renewable. 90% of that is a mixture of coal and gas. Now, in our energy space, we could always do more. That's without a doubt. Now, one of our big exports is consumable commodities in the form of natural gas and coal. And a lot of our natural gas and coal that we're exporting is what they're burning in India and China that produces all those emissions. So one way or another, we do have an impactful role to play in global CO2 emissions, and there's certainly more that we could do. If we are to have any tangible impact on the planet, we will have to look at those export fuels and the pollution that they are causing, and we would have to consider, is this the type of business we want to be in?
Do you think that sort of progressing towards a greener future is totally dependent on the cost of upgrading all our existing infrastructure?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different factors that will drive us to greening, or so-called greening of networks. First and foremost, it would be addressing climate change. So in terms of our global emissions, if we were to decarbonise every energy market across the globe, that would reduce our emissions by 30 to 40%. So it wouldn't reduce all emissions, but it would have an impact on the change we're seeing in the climate. Secondly to that, we'd build big infrastructure assets, because that is currently and was the way to provide reliable, secure and affordable electricity to cities. However, using current technology, you can actually get that cost of energy down even lower.
So films like this are encouraging, but do they sort of inhibit any action on a personal level? So they're just one person, what can they do? Do we sort of regress at that point?
There's a phenomenon called the cooling effect, and the cooling effect is a phenomenon that occurred after Al Gore's film, The Inconvenient Truth. So one of the interesting outcomes of that film was it actually led to a dip in action towards climate, and it gave people this false sense that someone else was already handling it and that they didn't have to do anything.
Do you think we could reverse climate change?
Absolutely.
And that's our segment for this week. Don't forget to join us next week for part 3 of the Climate Talk series. Until then, Ivan and Danny, back to you.
Thanks, Taylor. And that's our news for this week. We have the latest on our website and Facebook page.
Until next Sunday after 8, thanks for your company. Good evening.
Good night.